I really like the sort of flow it has to it. It's really about being in the moment for me and really focusing on the movement you have to make.
Hello and welcome to One Cool Thing, a podcast from indie game studio Die Gute Fabrik, hosted by me, Hannah Nicklin. One Cool Thing is a podcast speaking with people in and around video games about one cool thing not from games, which is really fascinating them right now. I'll introduce them and their practice, we'll talk about the one cool thing they've brought to the conversation, and consider how it's shaping how they think about their work. It's a chance to hear more about the practices of cool folks working in games, and hopefully somewhere where we can all reflect on how we think about how we make things. Without further ado, let's meet our next guest. Aran Koning is a Dutch indie game developer based in Utrecht who makes work as part of the Sokpop collective, which was born out of the European game jam community. They sometimes call themselves a video game boy band, whose members include Aran, also Tijmen Tio, Ruben Naus, and Tom Vandenbergenhart. Aran makes games, apps, and Sokpop as a whole have until recently been making a game a week as part of their Patreon, where they first drew the majority of their funding before they started releasing games on Steam, recently expanding it to the luxurious game a month format. I think they'd racked up like 78 games during that weekly phase, which is frankly mind-blowing. They've been nominated for IGF Awards and won a bunch of Dutch Game Awards, including the very Dutchly vibe named Awesome Achievement Award. Probably Aran's most standout success has been the card-based village building game Stacklands, although I have to put in a special mention for the 2016 custom control game Knife to Meet You, which is a kind of wooden game board where a tiny display shows computer-generated disses and a French kitchen knife swipes across the access to the controls. This is a quote about the game. It says, "The first few levels feature quite predictable blade movement, while later levels include feints and faster erratic movements, accompanied by trash talking on the display." That game was made with Amel Gibson, Jonathan van Hove, and Robin Baumgarten. Okay, Aran, how do you feel about the introduction? Anything you want to add, amend, or correct my pronunciations on?
Pronunciations were good, actually. Really well done.
Thank you. I mean, put that down to the amount of cycling that I watch. There's a lot of people from the Netherlands.
You know
there.
all the Dutch names. No, I think that was a good introduction. We used to do a game a month, and now actually we also recently switched to not even doing one a month anymore. We just try to do like 8 a year or something, which is a bit less than every month. So it's even more relaxed now. We're taking it easy.
I'm just really happy for your quality of life.
Yeah,
when the announcement went out and you were like, "Hey, we're stopping the game a week thing," I was like, "Oh, that's nice. They can take a breath."
Yeah, that was for sure really nice. Just having a bit more time, a bit less stress about all the deadlines and stuff.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a good switch.
So, Aran, I want to ask you what cool thing you've brought to our podcast audience today.
Right, so I thought it would be fun to chat a bit about mountains.
Mountains. Now, you're from the Netherlands,
Yeah.
Which is not unlike my home county of Lincolnshire, well known for being pretty flat. Although I do believe you have some hilly bits around where they hold the Amstel Gold Race. I know that cyclists, do come across some hilly bits there. But in general, I wonder if your sort of interest in mountains is because of being from the Netherlands, or if there's some other reason that they're fascinating to you.
No, I think for sure it's because here it's always so flat, and what I really appreciate about not having everything so flat is that you can, there's a lot more variance in what you see around you.
Mm-hmm.
Like here, you can always see everything at the same time, except for, like you mentioned, the place where they have the Amstel Gold Race in Zuid-Limburg, which is a lot more hilly. And so that's also one of my favorite places in the Netherlands. But I think it's definitely because, we don't have any mountains in the Netherlands. So whenever I see one, I go that's good.
I think that like similarly, like I come from the super flat part of the UK, and I remember going on holiday to Wales for the first time, and just everything about the landscape felt different. Like it just shaped space and like horizon differently as well. I wonder if you could tell us, do you remember the first mountain that you ever saw?
That's a really good question. I think it was once I went to Italy by bus, and we passed through Austria, and then I was like, whoa, we're in the Alps. And I was like, wow, it's so high here, It's so different. I mean, I did go, like, as a kid, I never, like, my parents aren't really into the mountains. So as a kid, we did go to, like, the south of France, which is a bit more hilly, but it's well, like, I don't know. I've been going to the Alps a few times, like, for holiday and stuff, and it's just so different. It's like a whole different ballpark than here.
And what's your sort of relationship to mountains like now? Are you seeking them out? Are you like doing? Are you cycling? Are you climbing?
Yeah, so I do a lot of cycling. I do running, and I recently picked up skiing as well. So it's a good set of fun things to do in the mountains. I really like going up mountains and also going down. It doesn't really matter to me whether that's by foot or by bike or by skis, but by skis preferably on the way down.
And so, what's your sort of most recent sort of memorable encounter with a mountain?
So I picked up skiing this year. I hadn't done it before, and that was a lot of fun. That for me, that was certainly a really cool way to spend time in the mountains. That is very different from cycling or running. I really like the sort of flow it has to it. Like you can really it's really about being in the moment for me, and really focusing on the movement you have to make. Because otherwise, yeah, you'll just eat shit. I really like that about it. It's a bit like mountain biking also. Yeah.
For sure. I'm going to just do a tiny shout out to one of my favorite books here. There's a book called The Living Mountain by Nan Shepherd, which was written in the 1940s, but feels super timeless. And it's this piece of sort of kind of part poetic, part nature writing about the Cairngorm Mountains in Scotland. And this is a little quote which really, really chimes with what you just said. Walking thus, hour after hour, the senses keyed, one walks the flesh transparent. But no metaphor, transparent or light as air is adequate. The body is not made negligible, but paramount. Flesh is not alienated, but fulfilled. One is not bodiless, but essential body.
Yeah.
And I completely agree, especially when you're traversing, when the pandemic first started in 2020, I got a cyclocross bike because I just really needed to escape into some woods.
Yeah.
And I was living in Copenhagen at the time. And there's some really, really beautiful kind of country parks, like full of deer and stuff. And like Denmark as a country isn't super wild. It's really hard to find wilderness there.
Yeah.
And so I sort of got this cyclocross bike is right, I'm going to get really muddy. I'm going to get really lost.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get lost in some woods specifically because
Yeah.
something of being around trees is really good for me. And I hadn't done any off-road like cycling before.
Right.
And like normally I'm riding, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm maybe training, but there was something super different about cycling off-road where I actually turned all headphone information off. And I found myself like on this like mountain bike trail on my cyclocross bike. So it wasn't super ideal, but it was also really, really fun. And I found myself like breathing through the riding. Like I was doing something terrifying. And I found myself like breathing out through the terrifying bit in a way that was just like, I was immediately there and my breath and my body was all that there was. And it was just magical. And I suppose like downhill skiing maybe feels similar.
Yeah, it does feel really similar because it's also quite scary. Like when it gets steep, it's quite scary, especially as a beginner. Like you really don't know what you're doing. But I also feel like that when just doing like road rides on a bike and going up like long climbs and stuff, like at some point like your brain just sort of shuts off and it's just like, okay, I'll just go to this next pole, and then I'll go to that tree, and then I'll go there. And I really like that. It's just a really sort of relaxing. Well, it's tough, but it's also really relaxing in a way.
I feel like the worst climbs are the ones where you can see the top from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
I really like the ones you can break down piecemeal as you sort of like, pick a landmark and say, okay, my life for this next moment is getting to that next bit.
Yeah, exactly. And if you already know what's coming all the way, it's also less fun, I think. What I really like for me at least, when cycling up mountains, what's really nice is that you get a different view every so often, and you see a lot of different stuff. And once you just see the end, you know, okay, I'll have to go there. But yeah, so it's kind of different.
I find that mountains really reshape my thinking as well. Like coming from a flat place, there's something about returning to my home county which makes me feel quite free in a certain way, because the skies are so big and the horizons are so far away, and it's like my natural state. But when the world shifts around me on a mountain, like climbing to the top of it, descending down it, I feel like my sense of space and time is being reshaped. I don't know if I'm being over romantic or if you feel the same way.
No, I agree. What I found really funny, when I think the first time I went to the real Alps for a cycling holiday was 2 years back. Took the train to Geneva and then cycled through the Alps back to the Netherlands. And so I think one of the craziest things to me at first was like, okay, so there's a mountain here and I'm on my bike and I can't just go there. I can't just go to this other valley. Like, what do you mean there's no bike path there? Which is maybe the most Dutch thing ever. Like, oh, there's not a bike path there? That's crazy.
Yeah, they're super used to having people on the roads, I suppose. Except that,
but other than that, it's also just the geography that's holding you back from going to so many places, which is cool. That if you get to certain places, then yeah, it does feel like an achievement in a way.
Now I'm going to shift us slightly more towards sort of, I guess, game design. Now, do you treasure mountains and this sort of mode of being as a way of sort of getting away from and recharging, or does it sort of make you like, have you had good ideas when you've been on the bike or skiing or hiking?
For me, it's mostly about recharging. When I'm cycling or when I'm running or doing whatever, it's mostly to empty my head and not necessarily to, like, some people say that they have a lot of thoughts on the bike. I never have that. Like, the only thing I think about is like, oh, I'm hungry, or my legs are tired or something, or it's still this far. And I just sort of look around and not paying attention to much else, which is part of the appeal for me.
Right.
That's why I do it.
We've had a couple of people bring things into the podcast which are sort of about, I think I've said the term lying fallow before, that idea that some like crop rotation essentially. So there are some fields that you use in a year, but some fields you don't use because they need to recharge the soil and stuff.
Oh, right.
And that you kind of need your brain to sometimes lie fallow, so just to, do nothing. Although I have to say, I do sometimes have thoughts on the bike. Like I have I go with like wired iPhone headphones, so I can press the little button and leave voice notes so that I don't have to remember anything that comes up. And it's like an emptying I do at the beginning of a bike ride. Like my brain thinks of a thing, I leave a voice note, and it's one less thing that's in my brain. And then by the time I get to like an hour in, my brain is just empty.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. For me, I don't know, it happens really quickly. When I'm on the bike, like thoughts go away. Head empty, no thoughts.
That's nice. That's nice. So, I mean, I know that you've certainly made a cycling game.
Yeah, wait, have I made two? I've made two.
You've made two?
I've made two.
I'm glad you know.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about those? Like, did they sort of reflect on some of that kind of beautiful, like, empty-headed presence that we're talking about?
Right. So the first one is a game called Skip Locked. which is a sort of more urban cycling game
Mm-hmm.
where you basically bike from A to B through sort of a New York-esque city with a lot of cars. Like basically there's only cars and you are there on your bike and you just go to various points, and there's like a traffic simulation, so you have to like keep an eye out when the cars use their blinkers so that they'll turn right. That kind of stuff
That doesn't
that
happen in real
happens.
life because no one's indicating. They're just running you
Yeah,
over.
maybe. And then the other one is a much different one in that it's more of a like a diary of a bike trip I did. It's a
Mhm.
game called Aran's Bike Trip. So it's literally about my bike trip. So I took a 360 camera on a bike trip. It was a really short trip for 2 days. And then I shot a bunch of photos while I was going. And then I sort of made a way to look around them like you would in Google Street View. And it's simple like point and click stuff, but you follow me on this sort of short journey through the Netherlands. What I wanted to do with that game was partly go on a vacation, um, but also make a video game at the same time, which doesn't work. So that was it was a really fun to do, but it like took away that sort of head empty no thoughts aspect of cycling.
Mm.
For me, because you're just constantly thinking, okay, how do I turn this into content?
Mm.
You really turn into like content brain, which is not really what you want on a vacation. So what I think, yeah, that's pretty interesting. I think that was one of the rides where I probably, yeah, thought a lot more than I would normally.
Yeah, this is making me think of there's a comic called You, a Bike and a Road by Eleanor Davis. And I think it was 2016 comic. And she does this super long bike ride, which is essentially along the US border with
Oh, awesome.
Mexico. I'm panicking now because I'm worrying that the US does not border with Mexico, but I'm fairly certain
It does.
it does. There's just sudden panics that you get when you say a thing without thinking about it.
It's fine. We're European. They don't know about us. We don't know about them.
We're allowed. But yeah, so she writes this sort of book about traveling, but it's also like full with this sort of privilege of being an American and just seeing what life is like on the border, as well as
Right.
like her processing a bunch of emotional stuff. I really, really recommend that comic, You, a Bike and a Road, if anyone listening is interested. But I'm sure that was wrought with the same thing, because as soon as you try and turn cycling into something which is like reflection or like a story that you tell, you're just into a different mode, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot like normally for me it's a lot about sort of seeing what happens and the exploratory aspect, and in a way it gets kind of lost when you're actively really pursuing it at all times. Like, oh, I wish I got a flat tire so I have some content for my game or something like that.
These games that you've made about cycling, like how have people responded to them? Like, do you feel like you got at the thing you were wanting to get at?
So for Skidlocked, I think that did like my main goal was having this thing where you have a bunch of cars and you as a cyclist are in between them, and once you hit them, like that's bad. It's really bad in the game. And you gotta really pay attention. I think that worked really well, and which is really cool to see. Like I didn't really expect to sort of capture that vibe. And for Aaron's bike trip, I don't know. I have mixed thoughts about it. It's certainly a game, and I really like the idea of there being like a travel vlog sort of video game. But at the same time, I'm not sure if this was the format in a way. Like maybe it could have just been a film, or maybe it could have just been some photos. But I have thought about it some more, and I think it would be interesting. like to try it again in maybe a different place, maybe in the mountains, I thought, because then all the photos I took, like it's in the Netherlands, so like it's not that, like it looks nice, and the weather was good, but it's not super nice. And I was thinking maybe if it's in the mountains, then you get nicer photos, and maybe that will add to the experience also.
Sure.
Of it being more of an adventure.
I think it's really interesting to hear you sort of think through this, I guess, like form-driven design question, because sometimes you have a story to tell or an experience to share, and you try making it in one medium, and like sometimes it's just better in another.
Yeah.
And a part of that is, it's being a games practitioner and understanding your medium, trying the thing, and then going, this is not the place to uncover this feeling. Actually, I need to make, I don't know, a piece of audio art or installation work or a film, as you say. There's a really beautiful book called Mountain High, which is by Daniel Freber and Pete Golding, which is about, according to them, Europe's 50 greatest cycle climbs. So
awesome.
maybe pick that up and
I do actually know that book, I think, but I haven't probably not done any of them. I don't know which ones are in there.
It's a good one, and I don't know Pete Golding's work super well, but Daniel Freber does really. He's got a writing style which is sort of spare and eloquent at the same time. It's a really beautiful book. Right, so I'm going to steer us even further into game design now, and ask you if you feel like, because you've obviously been thinking about coming on this podcast, if you felt like, there was something that you wanted to offer the audience for their own thoughts about how they make games or whatever it is that they make that you get from Mountains.
I think one part that we didn't really talk about that much yet about Mountains that I really like, the exploratory aspect of it. Like when I see a mountain, I go like, oh, you can get to the top of that, and then you sort of look at a map and try to figure out your way there. I think that's really cool. I think there's something there for sure. And like there's so many cool different aspects that are related to traveling in these places that I think are really interesting. Like for example, you can't get from A to B because there's a mountain in the way, like something like that. And so it sort of forces you to go around or take another route. And a big part of what I like about mountains as well is like looking at these maps. And that's where you really get this experience of, oh, so you can get up there, or oh, if you want to go there, you first have to go there and then there. I think stuff like that is really interesting. I was also thinking that in a way, a short hike, the game is already a really good game about mountains, in that it forces you to it's a game about a mountain, so that makes sense. But it also really has that feeling, I think, where you're trying to get up this mountain and you sort of unlock stuff slowly. If you look at it in the most boring way, you essentially just unlock new movement. But I think that's really cool. So for me, I think there's lots of interesting stuff there.
So just for people who might not have heard of A Short Hike before, it's a sort of short adventure video game by Adam Robinson Yu. Really beautiful game. And I think one of the strongest qualities of the game is its pacing, as you say. If you talk about it in a simple way, you just say, oh yeah, you unlock the abilities that you need to reach higher parts of the mountain. But its pacing is just so well designed. The pacing of the space, it's 3D, so it allows you to move around this mountain which you're hiking to the top of, and it gives you a simple framing to do so. But in just the way that it's laid out within the space, just makes, no matter what sort of side you approach it from, there's always something that just makes the pacing hit real right. It must have either just been a huge sort of super inspired process or a really rigorously tested one of the two.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but it definitely has that exploratory sort of vibe to it.
And it has secrets as well. It's got really beautiful secrets and
Really?
shortcuts. And well, I think of them as secrets. Like you'll
Okay.
It feels like a secret when I discover like a cave or
that's true. Yeah, it feels like you're going to places you're not supposed to be in a way.
Yeah, right. And also that sense of progression that feels a little bit like, you know, I don't know, picking up a bike for the first time and then a month later and 2 months later, right?
You keep going further.
Yeah, that pleasant curve where you just like everything's getting better quickly. Like the game definitely feels like that, I think.
And then it doesn't overstay its welcome, which is really good as also.
Yeah.
It's like you get this nice curve and then it's not a grind or anything. It's like, oh yeah. You made it to the mountain.
I did it in one sitting, I think.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I always appreciate in a game.
Yeah, me too.
Despite the fact that gamers want these 50-hour games, like it's a good, I don't know. Yeah, it's like 4 to 5 hours or something, right?
I think it's way shorter. Well, I guess it depends.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't see everything, but
2 to 3 hours unless you want to be really
I think 2 to 3
probably.
hours. Yeah. Exactly.
Do you think that feeling of exploration is a thing that you're interested in sort of digging into in your game design?
I think it is. Like for me, like it's really hard to get that good sense of exploration. I think Stacklands has it a bit, but in a different way. But for me, that's always the most fun thing about games, I think. It's the exploring part where you're sort of figuring out everything. And for me, once you sort of figure out everything in the game, then it stops being interesting, or at least it gets less interesting. So for me, a lot of times when I play a game, I'll just play it until, you know, I've sort of figured it out. Once I feel like I've seen most of it, and then I sort of try to fill in the rest. So for me, I try to have that exploratory thing in my games.
Maybe you could just briefly explain Stacklands to people, because you sort of touched on it there.
So Stacklands is a card-based village builder. So what you do is you have a villager card and you have a berry card, for example. You put the villager on top of the berry card and then he eats it. If you put him on top of a berry bush card, you get a berry. If you put him on top of a tree, you get woods. Later, you can start combining all these different things and over time sort of figure out all the different resources that there are in the game. And there's these packs you can buy, like booster packs you can buy with sort of the in-game currency that will also allow you to get new cards. So there's always basically these sort of new cards that you can get, which is like it's a lot of fun to explore, I think, because you at some point you run into challenges and then you have to get new cards to figure out how to solve them. For example, like there's a rabbit card, it's constantly jumping around everywhere and messing up like the layout of all your other cards. And then you're like, wow, okay, well, now I'm gonna go complain on the Steam forums. But then later you find out there's actually an animal pen card that allows you to put the rabbit in the animal pen and then it doesn't move. So you just get I guess a rabbit only gives you poo, but and a cow he gives you milk now, and also he's not jumping around everywhere. So
yeah. And as you go on, things get more sort of, recipes get more complicated. I call them recipes, but I mean combinations of cards. I think something like a line I would draw there, like I love playing Stacklands and I got super lost in it the first time I played it, to the degree where I was like, I need to be careful with this game. Otherwise I will forget to eat and drink. But I think one of the really compelling parts of it is the sort of surprise. Like I'm someone who really likes surprise and exploration in games. Like that little laugh you do when a thing surprises you, like, that goes with that makes this. Like that's at the heart of a bunch of how I enjoy stuff, whether it be comedy or jazz. Like
Right.
jazz has these standards, but then the idea is the musicians surprise you in how they put them together, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like there is an element in roguelikes, which I also really enjoy. Is that
Yeah,
you
for
sort of-
sure.
You understand the structure, but then it combinatorially surprises you.
Yeah. It's like
Um,
Spelunky for me is a lot about that. It's like you sort of figure out how it works, and then there's always something new to it that like changes in a way. Sometimes it changes your understanding of everything, but also sometimes it reaffirms that you really know what's happening in the game. That's
yeah,
a very vague way to say
no,
it, but
but no, and it chimes super strongly with me with my experience of mountains, like turning a corner on the bike and suddenly you're facing a wall like of a
yeah,
climb.
it's so funny.
Or like
That is exactly that moment where you're like, oh no. And I always laugh also. I think, I don't know, who was I talking to? I don't know. We were chatting about this. I was chatting, I think, with Ruben about this today because I mentioned we're talking about mountains on the podcast. And he was like, yeah, and then when you suddenly turn around and find like a big climb, I always laugh. Like, I find it funny. It's like, oh yeah, sure. There's more.
there's
Like,
more of this.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But then equally, when you turn a corner and suddenly like all of the landscape drops away and the view is just transformed as
Yeah.
well, like
That's also really cool.
two different kinds of surprises, and you don't get the one without the other.
Yeah. No, that's true. Otherwise, if there's no surprise, if it always would be one or the other, like, would not be fun. Well, I mean, guess it's pretty nice to have a good view, but the surprise is what also makes it fun, I think.
Absolutely. And it's, mountains hide their secrets as landscapes, whereas, the Netherlands and Lincolnshire,
Yeah,
they're
there's
just
no
like,
secrets.
here we are.
Yeah.
The surprise is the sky.
Yeah. What I do like if there's like bike paths that are really like curly in a way, like but once you just go down a straight road, for me, it sort of takes the fun away. Like just for cycling as well, just having that, it needs to have that that exploration to it. Otherwise, I could just go inside and sit on my Swift trainer or something like that. Yeah.
So people listening might not know what Zwift is.
Yeah.
Zwift is people in bike world think it's a video game, but people in video games have never heard of it. And it is essentially a virtual environment that you plug a virtual trainer into. You can connect your bike chain to a cog on a power meter driven indoor trainer, and it sort of turns your bike into a controller. So how hard you push is translated into how fast you go in the virtual world that you're cycling in. And at any one moment, like thousands of people around the world are in this little like series of virtual worlds. Some of them are totally made up and they're full of dinosaurs and volcanoes. And then sometimes like the world championships often get their own course made. So there's a brand new pretend Scotland that you can cycle in Zwift right now because the Glasgow World Championships are coming up. I don't know if you've explored virtual Scotland yet.
I haven't yet. I haven't done Zwift in a while, especially now that the weather's becoming better again. I try to avoid it.
Well, I still actually, with a little bit of nostalgia of being a Londoner half a decade ago, do sometimes return to virtual London and ride up like Box Hill and some of the hills there. But in any case, I think, Zwift is funny, isn't it? Because people race there,
Yeah,
you put in your
Tour de
weight.
France was there, right? A couple years back.
Yeah, they did a virtual Tour de France during COVID, and some of the best cyclists in the world got in there. And obviously, it removes the the bike control element of
because there's no steering.
Yeah. So, increasingly there are ways to steer in there, but it's, you're not going to crash and,
and you can't go off road or anything. So like you're basically glued to the road.
Yes. Yeah. But because you give it your weight and it knows your power, it can calculate your power to weight ratio, which translates into speed. And then they also have some like drag coefficients that they throw in there maths wise.
Yeah.
And in any case, you can race people on there. People actually win money racing in Zwift.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The world esports championships this year features some quote unquote real sports, and some of them are really stupid made up games that like some people are handing money to other people to make, and it's really ridiculous. But Zwift is one of them.
Really? That's cool.
So Zwift
Is
continues
Swift an
to,
esport?
it is, according to the World Esports Championships.
I guess so.
I don't know. I wrote a whole article about Zwift and its relationship to real cycling and cycling spectatorship.
Yeah.
For a collection by Holly Gramazio, put together a collection of, it's called New Rules, and it was sort of about play during the early days of the pandemic.
Right.
So anyone's interested, you can read my sort of long form article, Dramatic Irony, Zwift and Racing Under Lockdown, or That Time I Became an Esports Streamer.
Yeah.
So that exists.
You did do the Swift streaming. I think I watched once.
Yeah, I did. You know, but they probably, if you really want to see me sweating on Twitch, I guess the videos are still out. I can't even know if Twitch keeps the videos.
They do for a while, but they remove it, I think, after some time. Yeah.
Fingers crossed it's not still out there, because I'm sure in some way that will come back to haunt me in an era of like, you know, deep fake, etc. All right. I'm going to begin to wrap us up now.
Sure.
Do you want to offer the listening audience anything in particular as sort of a last thought or a takeaway?
Oh, I'm always really bad at this. Whenever people ask me about a thought, I always run out immediately.
Have no thoughts.
Second. Yeah.
Brain empties. You're in the mountain state.
Yeah, exactly.
As a sort of final point, do you have anything that you'd like to promote or any socials that we should follow you on?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I guess, do people still follow other people on Twitter? Yeah, follow me on Twitter. I'm Aran Koning, just my whole name, my full name.
All right. Well, Aran, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope that you get to return to the mountains sometime soon.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of One Cool Thing from Die Gute Fabrik. As usual, leave a rating or review where you can. If this time was of value to you, that's the best way to say thank you. I'll be back soon with a new episode, speaking with another cool thinker and maker in the field of video games. And in the meantime, check out Die Gute Fabrik on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You can find us everywhere as Gute Fabrik. That's GUTE FABRIK. This podcast was produced, edited, and sound designed by Tom Wally. Additional production and research by Unamin Kavanagh. Our theme music is by Nick Ellis, whose music you can find under the name Tenby on Bandcamp. That's TENBY. Stay thoughtful, friends. Take care. Goodbye.